Life is full of stress, and the best way to release that stress varies from person to person. For me personally, that would be through music, either writing music myself or just listening to it. There's nothing better than dancing your troubles away to a great song, or having a certain song explain what you're feeling at the time. Sound design is no different. No job has a better description than literally creating music to set a tone or feeling for a certain scene. Score is the most underrated attribute to a film and deserves more attention. I mean, could you imagine the first 10 minutes of Pixar's Up without its iconic music that makes me feel depressed beyond comprehension? No, you couldn't. And that's my point. Many artists working in sound design have mastered notes that pull on our heartstrings to make us feel triumphant, defeated, frightened, and courageous. But what happens when these cynics decide to make us feel uncomfortable and anxious to the point we feel like we're part of the movie? Well, that's exactly what the Safdie brothers have done in their movie starring Adam Sandler,
Uncut.
Right.
I hope you enjoy my explanation on how they managed to include us in their orchestra of work with anxiety through music. Adam Sandler has to be one of my favorite actors working right now, and it's not because of movies like Billy Madison. Uncut Gems is actually my second favorite anxiety-inducing film, the first being Punch Drunk Love, which actually includes the Sandman himself. What is it about Adam that fits him perfectly into these roles? I mean, there are severe differences between Barry and Howard, but where they meet is based on their decisions, meaning their lack of common sense involving them. Uncut Gems is definitely a tragedy story, but unlike the usual fall from grace we get from most films, Howard Ratner was already in the slums. Right off the bat, we were introduced to debt collectors pressing on our protagonist, if you could call him that. This story wasn't set up by accident. Right away, we were thrown in the hole that Howard dug himself into and sat anxiously next to him as he pitifully tried to claw himself out, creating a feeling of dread and punishment that we as an audience knew was inevitable. In the Darwinian perspective of emotions, there are basic emotions that are inherited and shared across the human experience. Researchers of the Darwinian perspective, such as Robert Plutchik, have identified several primary emotions such as rage, loathing, or grief, each of these emotions having several levels of intensity. For instance, the less intense levels of the emotion for terror are fear and then apprehension. Plutchik's theory says that we can promote fear in anyone. Fear is a psychological experience to prepare individuals for the fight or flight response. However, Plutchik's theory doesn't easily account for anxiety. Fear is a reaction to a specific danger or threat, while anxiety is unspecific and vague. Anxiety isn't a lower level of fear either, or even apprehension. Anxiety is diffused with a vague sense of apprehension, rather than fear caused by specific stimuli. Anxiety is often thought to be a future-orientated mood, a vague, discomforting sense that things can and will go wrong. What better description for this movie, right? Howard effortlessly builds his house of cards all around him, and it just takes a small gust of wind to topple it all down to the ground. Daniel Lepannon's score is what holds it all together. From the opening, we hear these ethereal synth sounds enveloping an outer space-like visual, the synths becoming sharper and sharper until it almost sounds like a ring into the ears. Most of the score is very pleasant and relaxing, but gets swallowed by the over-talking and rapid-fire questioning that crowds the film. It's like trying to meditate for half an hour after just being handed an eviction notice. Intensity and pacing takes a front row seat throughout these scenes, but would be completely empty without their underlying tone that they set. As we established earlier, anxiety is basically fear of the unknown, and the central technique that created these feelings was a lack of repetition throughout the score. Instead of following standard song structure, the track progressed forward through changing ambient phrases, aside from a two-note synth pattern that fade in and out. What this does is removes the audience's ability to predict what will come up next in the song. Music tends to swell, or crescendo, to pull strong emotions, but Leppannon seems to insert them in random places to keep the anxious feelings high. In the end, the score was an important invisible force that kept me fidgeting in my chair. Due to the second time watching this film, I couldn't help but become increasingly frustrated by Howard's decisions. I guess you wouldn't really understand it unless you've known someone dealing with an addiction, because that's what the bottom line is, a mortal man's struggle with an addiction to gambling as he falls into his own self-destruction. I can't recall another film where I was relieved by the main character's death, finally reaching a silence that can only be realized by the end. It's sad, but sometimes that's the only way to silence that type of noise. It's very reminiscent of real life cases, and I hope I never have to experience an ending like that. Bravo to the Safdie brothers for an excellent reminder on what it means to be human in a fast-paced and unforgettable film like Uncut Gems. I just want to say that your actions don't finalize who you are as a person. I don't remember where the saying came from, but not every story has a sad ending. And if you're sad right now, then that just means it's not the end. And if you or a family member are dealing with an addiction, please seek out professional help. There's always people that love and care. And if you don't have someone like that in your life, just know that I care. So please reach out. I'd be happy to talk. Thank you very much, everybody. Life is full of stress, and the best way to oh my God, Jesus, what's going on? But what happens when these cynics decide to make us feel, oh my God. Could you imagine the first 10 minutes of Pixar? Could you imagine the first 10 minutes of Pixar's Up? Iconic music that makes me depressed beyond Jesus.